Now what you're about to see is another one of those things that could only happen in America. Having a fascination for this kind of impassable terrain, land that looks like it comes from another planet, is quite one thing. Deciding that for kicks you're going to drive straight over it is another. But that's exactly what a group of Jeep enthusiasts decided 45 years ago. They saw this impassable terrain as a challenge, and they felt sure that their Hardy Willis Jeeps could cross it no problems. They created the very first Jeepers Jamboree, a rather curious affair in which Jeep owners pay for the privilege of hammering their own vehicles over rocks, through mud and along terrifying passes in this Jeep utopia known as Rubicon Springs. And there is absolutely no shortage of Jeepers wanting to take up that challenge. What started off as a fairly modest affair with just a few vehicles has now grown into a huge event attracting people from all over the world. Entry now is so popular that it's decided via a kind of lottery system. And guess who's managed to bag a winning ticket? Of course, you can't take part in the biggest and the baddest Jeep Jamboree without having your very own Jeep to drive in. And this one is mine. It's going to get me through the next couple of days, hopefully. It's a 4-litre Jeep Wrangler, and it's just like the ones that you'll find cruising down the good old King's Road. There are no special modifications on this vehicle at all. In fact, the president of Chrysler is adamant that any vehicle that Chrysler produce bearing the Jeep badge has to be capable of completing the Rubicon Trail in one piece. Now, about that Rubicon Trail, off-road trails are rated from 1 to 10. 1 is, yes, the easiest, and there are plenty of those. But there is only 110, and it's the Rubicon here in California. It may only be 22 miles long, but it's 22 miles that takes people to places roads just don't want them to go to. Now, I've been warned that this path is a boulder-infested, differential smashing, kidney bruising, wheel bending path to nowhere. In short, it's a Jeep heaven, and I've always been a girl who's game, so here goes. The trail has all the perfect ingredients. You never know what's around the corner. There's breathtaking scenery, and it certainly challenges your driving skills. A comforting thought as I approach the first tricky bit of the day is my trusty copy of Mark A. Smith's Guide to Safe, Common Sense Off-Road Driving. What I want to know is, where's the common sense in driving through all of this lot instead of round it? Still, I've been assured by the expert that there's a simple technique to rock driving. You need low gearing, a supple suspension, nerves of steel, and a very understanding bank manager.
All right, come forward, me, cut, me.
If you were one of these people that thought to get excited behind the wheel, what you need is speed, forget it. This is absolutely thrilling, but speed has got no place here. You want the lowest gear possible. You chug along with just the occasional delicate touch on the accelerator. And you never, ever use the clutch, no matter how tempting it is. Just finished my first day on the Rubicon Trail. We've been driving for 13 hours. I'm absolutely exhausted. And I don't think I've been this dirty since I was about 7. Still, never mind, because I've got a night in a tent and a bath in an icy cold lake to look forward to. Some girls get all the luck, don't they? The Rubicon Trail is renowned for the beauty and the toughness of its terrain. But it's also just as renowned for the huge party that takes place every year over at the Rubicon Springs camping spot. And as the event has grown over the years into a huge production, so has the supporting cast.
Hi, I'm Whitey McKnight, and I'm running the bar at the Rubicon Springs bar, campground bar. And Jeeps get in here normally about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and we have a band that comes and plays.
What do you think's special about the Rubicon Trail?
Oh, it's I believe it's the most difficult trail, and it's 9 hours to go 9 miles. And once people get here, they treat them like gold. They feed them really well, and the cocktails are pretty adequate.
Cool. I know the beer's cold.
The beers are cold. This is the coldest beer this side of Lake Tahoe.
What's your job on the trail? Because you have a special job, don't you?
Trail guide or rock roller. Today, I'm just walking along, getting rock stacked in so everybody can make it through.
And what do you do with all the tricky points? Do you guide people through?
We try to keep them on top of the rocks.
Have you ever had anybody that didn't stay on top of the rocks?
Oh yeah, now and then.
Go on, tell us, what's the worst, who's the worst driver you've ever had? Can you remember?
Oh, we've had some doozies, that's for sure. But I'm not going to name any names, okay?
Has anybody ever rolled a Jeep?
Oh yeah, it does happen, but that's why we basically, we put an emphasis on safety, okay? And that's why we want everybody to wear their safety belts or whatever. If something does happen, that safety belt will work.
As you settle your aching bones down by the campfire with half a cow to chew on and of course the obligatory bottle of beer, it's the perfect time to unwind and listen to the day's tall tales. And believe me, there are plenty of those. Just when you find it's all over and you're winding down on the final stretch, comes the toughest part of the trail, Cadillac Hill. Well, this is it. We've reached the end of the Rubicon Trail and it is so beautiful here. I can't believe we've just driven through that valley. It's only 10 miles long, but it's taken us a day and a half to travel through it. And I tell you, it's not for the faint-hearted.
Okay, true confessions of a motoring writer time. I've never really liked the Porsche 911. Now, before you reel back in amazement, let me put that in context. I drove my first Carrera RS lightweight in 1972, and I've driven most models since then, often at speed, often on racetracks. I haven't liked the cramped interiors, I didn't like the heating, I didn't like the way you couldn't see the speedometer through your hand on the steering wheel, funnily enough. I didn't like the howling rasp from behind your left ear, and I didn't like the fact that at night, heading for a strange roundabout, you got that sweaty palm feel that you were never quite sure whether the front wheels were going to lock up or the rear end was going to overtake you. In short, in unskilled hands, the car was sheer dangerous. This is the new 911, and it's something completely different, and I've changed my opinion. And while it's still unmistakably a Porsche 911 in looks, under the skin it's very different. The chassis is now the Boxster, the engine is still in the back but it's water cooled, and as far as the handling goes, well, they seem to have tamed the beast. Now, I don't usually like bringing cars to test tracks to demonstrate their road handling. I think it's a totally false environment and it gives you a wrong feeling about the car and tempts you to go a lot faster than you ever would on the public road. That said, if I'm going to demonstrate the changes in 911 handling, well, I prefer to be well off the public road. Now, let's just speed up a little bit round here. Let me show you what I mean. We've turned in sharp, building up the speed, front tyres scrabbling for grip. The car's still understeering, still very stable, and away. Now, if you'd lifted off in that situation in the old 911, well, the back would have snapped round on you with great ferocity, and you would have been very lucky indeed to have caught it, especially on a wet, greasy road. So, with the obligatory macho games on the racetrack out of the way, let's get down to the realities of life on the road with the new 911. In the first place, well, it's almost 70,000 quid's worth of two-seater with the usual Porsche useless children's seats in the back. But of course, they fold down for extra luggage space. Completely redesigned and repackaged interior, a speedo you can actually see from the wheel with a repeater in the middle of the rev counter. Porsche 911 pedals were always a nightmare. The company insisted on hinging them from the floor, so they were stiff and difficult to operate, and they made the car quite jerky to drive unless you were really used to it. Now they're pendulum pedals hung from the top, and they're much easier to operate. Without being in any way sexist about it, Porsche also say they make the 911 much easier for women to drive. Out the back, the 3.4-litre 6 is now water instead of air-cooled, and the new 6-speed gearbox, well, that slices through the gate with an ease and precision that's a joy compared to the old car, where you used to get quite severe driveline shunt if you got the gear change even slightly wrong. Make no mistake though, they may have tamed the handling, but this is still a very fast car. 173 miles an hour flat out, they tell me, and 0 to 60 in around 4.5 seconds, and that's seriously quick by any standards. This 911 gets decent ventilation for a change, sensible heater controls, and the sort of toys you'd expect for your 70,000 quid. In-car navigation, climate control, and the sort of in-car CD system you'd expect. Above all, it's still an immensely durable, robust, well-built car, capable of travelling very long distances in all sorts of weathers. Porsche owners have come to expect literally hundreds of thousands of miles of reliable service from their cars, and I can't see this one being any exception. .911 owners always used to boast that their cars were true driver's machines, but I never used to believe them. I always thought there were only a handful of truly gifted drivers who could control a 911 at or near its limits of adhesion, especially on wet roads and especially if a sudden emergency arose. This new 911 is much safer and much easier to drive fast on the public road, and I think that's a very, very good idea.
Caravans, curse of the holiday motorist, chugging down the motorway usually two abreast, holding up a trail of motorists and lorry drivers alike. Well, maybe not in this case. Motoring journalist Mark Walton has teamed up with Chrysler Jeep to take on the speed record for towing a caravan. But how did this amazing record attempt come about? Brian Reese of Chrysler.
This crazy man called Mark Walton phoned us up and said, would we try and break the land speed record for towing a caravan? So we're going to have a damn good go at it. Got lovely weather for it today. And 126 miles an hour is the target. Doesn't sound that much, but it's got to be a normal caravan. Can't be any aerodynamic changes, and we can't take everything out. The caravan's got the cooker and the fridge in there still. 126 the target. We reckon we might get about 130 today with the Vicron, because it's one hell of a powerful car, and we've got good weather for it. So that's the plan.
And what sort of speed do you think you'll achieve?
Viper would normally do the best part of 180 miles an hour, but we put the caravan on the back, and it's like a big parachute and air brake on the back almost. And we'll probably get stuck at about 130 today, I should think.
So let's meet our intrepid pilot. Mark, what are the major things you'll need to keep an eye on during the run?
The main thing is just basically no really strong crosswinds, because obviously we don't want the caravan sliding around. And not having any rain is another advantage, obviously. And there's actually a balloon floating around over there, which is giving us a lot of confidence as well, because balloons don't usually go from windy weather either, so it's looking good.
So with the onboard radar transmitter set up, Mark heads out for the first run. How does the man from Abbey Caravans feel about their precious mobile home losing a trusty Volvo estate, which normally becomes a standard feature?
it's into unknown territory for us. And we were a little bit concerned that what the stability would be like. Yes, one must bear in mind that, I mean, we're not looking at advanced aerodynamics because caravans are only legally allowed to be towed at 60 miles an hour.
Although not allowed to make major modifications to the car in the rules, the team will even try a new air filter in search of extra speed.
Well, it gets up to about 115, just like that. Yeah. Dead easy, no problem. And then all of a sudden it's counting the miles. And then 116, 117. You stop thinking, go on.
So drastic action is called for. Believing that heat build-up under the bonnet could be a source of some lost performance, the team try a few runs with the bonnet slightly open.
The record currently stands at 126.77, so we need 0.8, so we need 0.1 of a mile an hour faster. I mean, I think we're so close now, absolutely every millimetre of difference could get us 0.1.
The team sets out for one last run. If they don't succeed this time, they'll call the whole attempt off.
That actually felt like the best run. So at the end, I just glanced down at the rev counter, and normally it's just about 5,100 RPM. And that time I just glanced down and I thought, blimey, that's about 5,200, 5,300, and it's just a tiny, tiny fraction. And the engine note was just ever so slightly higher. And I thought, well, if that's not it, then that's it, there we go. 1 mile an hour over.
So congratulations to the team. They've just proven how fast a caravan could go.
Jimny Cricket. Wasn't that the name of some squeaky voiced critter in a schmaltzy Walt Disney thing? I don't know. Anyway, in this context, Jimny is the name of Suzuki's little tiny off-roader, also a squeaky voiced wee critter. That's unfair, really. I mean, a 16-valve, 1.3-litre little engine is hardly likely to sound fruity and deep-chested, is it? At least it manages to chirp out about a 79 bhp, which isn't bad, especially in a car weighing no more than a packet of fags. Trouble is, it's not much bigger than a packet of fags either. Small is definitely what it's about here. And once you've got over that, well, it's not too bad. Some people buy their 4x4s for the commanding driving position, others for the sheer bulk, the sheer presence of them. Well, when I say others, I mean men who were bullied at school and neurotic women who seem to confuse the school run with Vietnam. But this is not one of those 4x4s. This doesn't so much loom up menacingly behind in your rearview mirror when you're sat in traffic as it sneaks up, taps you on the shoulder and says, "Excuse me," in a squeaky little voice. It certainly isn't a frightening vehicle. In fact, if you were to look in your rearview mirror, you might just catch a view of the top of the head of the person driving it, and that's about it. Unless you're going to work on a go-kart, of course. Really, to get into this thing, you've got to be smiling before you even climb on board, smiling before you drive it, and the fact that it looks so friendly helps there. So does this. I learnt this trick in a car park yesterday. Watch. Boom! Unusually, I'm going to tell you the price of this car early on, and that's because I reckon it's essential when you're assessing it as a purchase. And the reason is all Suzuki Jimnys come as standard with power-assisted steering, electric front windows, electric door mirrors, twin airbags, side impact bars. In fact, there's hardly anything you can really buy and spend your money on to add on to this as an optional extra. And so the price for these things, well, that's the really good news. For the manual gearbox version, it's £9,995 on the road. And for this, the automatic, £10,870. Now that's super mini territory. So, comparing this with its competition, what can the Super Minis do that it can't? Well, you might say parking. In fact, it's a cinch in this. The turning circle is amazing. Driving is usually a good point in the Super Minis, just as it is in this. In fact, it's immense fun. Agreed, it does roll a little bit when it corners, and I can't say that I forgot entirely those disastrous toppling incidents of some of the earlier Suzuki Jeeps. But actually, they've sorted this so that the rear end will come round and it's far more likely to swap ends before ever it'll roll over, which I'm sure is a kind of comfort somewhere. Super Minis are also economical, of course. Well, you can expect this to return over 34 miles per gallon average, 1.3 16 valve. You'd expect it to be pretty good for that. So in fact, there's very little. Boot space, perfectly reasonable. It's small, but then it's a small car. And even car makers have to obey the laws of physics. Looking at it another way then, what can this do that the Super Minis can't? Well, I'll tell you. We've got a lever down here, and it can do this. We just changed into four-wheel drive. It's even got a low transfer box, so if the going gets really bumpy, your little Suzuki Jimny can keep going. Now you do that in a Super Mini? I don't think so. I don't imagine it's going to pose a real threat to Land Rovers, Land Cruisers and 4Tracks. But remember, Suzuki have been making mini leisure 4x4s now for 30 years, with the SJ, Samurai and Vitara to their name, so they should have got the hang of it by now. David Hull is a stable manager and uses a variety of vehicles in his day-to-day work.
Right, I'm a stable manager here. I do the day-to-day running of the yard, care of the horses. I usually use a quad bike for most of my daily chores. I don't use anything as grand as this. But on the other hand, I quite often use a Range Rover towing a horse box to go to shows. It's not a bad little toy, really. It's not going to pull many huge loads, but it's not a bad little toy. Another good thing about this little baby, it's got plenty of leg room. I'm 6 foot and I've got plenty of stretchy room here.
Well, it might be a bit of a lightweight and it might have somewhat excessive noise at motorway speeds. But it feels well put together. Most of it's made from galvanised steel, so it should last forever anyway. If you're looking for a budget 4x4 for 10 grand, you might want to consider buying second-hand and getting something perhaps a little more substantial. But if you're in the market for a second car or just for a small car that's got ample room in the back, that looks a little bit different, and that also means come the winter snows, you certainly will not be stuck, then I'd say this has got to be on your list. I know it would be on mine.